Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast, where empathy meets action in the world of leadership. Your host, Gino Degregori, engages with innovators and seasoned professionals from diverse sectors, all demonstrating the power of leading with kindness. And now, your host, Gino Degregori.
Today's guest believes that leadership isn't about performance, it's about purpose. From Navy intel to AI strategy in the federal space, Michael Chavira has built his legacy on service, ethics, and impact. Hi, I'm Gino Degregori, and welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast. Our guest today is Michael Chavira, the co-founder and managing partner of Axiologic Solutions. He's also a Navy veteran, multi-degree holder, and Ironman athlete. Michael has scaled Axiologic from a two-person startup into 300-plus person company with nearly $100 million in revenue. Super excited to have this conversation, as Michael's story proved that you can lead at scale without sacrificing mission, values, or humanity. His blend of operational excellence, character, and innovation sets a high bar for kind leadership, especially in the high-stakes sectors like defense and national security. Michael, welcome. To kick us off, can you share with us a little bit about you and your journey?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gino. So I'm originally from Wyoming. I went to the University of Wyoming, and after graduating from there, I joined the Navy, which brought me out to the East Coast. Ended up still wanted to do some schooling and went to the University of Virginia, where I met Tom Stauber, my business partner. We became really good friends. And after we graduated from there, we both worked in our respective careers at our defense contracting companies, and ended up joining forces a couple of years later after graduation. And I was like, hey, why don't we start our own company? I bet we could do this better, faster, and cheaper than some of our competitors. And that's what we did. It was just basically the two of us, very naively, I would say, just started a company that we did some things that I'm not sure I would do today, but experience is a great teacher. And we've been running Axiologic now for about 16, coming on 17 years now.
Congratulations. That's an amazing journey and success. Definitely jumping in and being an entrepreneur, and it's definitely quite the journey, right? You never know. Some days are good, some days are bad. I know that. So awesome. Well, the first question that I love asking my guest is, what does being a kind leader mean to you?
I would say, being a kind leader, and I thought about this a bit, but to me, it's leading with clarity, dignity, and accountability, in service to your people and the mission. To me, clarity would mean know the goals. People know the goals, not just you know the goals, and that the decisions are right and people understand the why. Dignity would mean that the process is fair and human as much as possible. We explain the decisions. We try and invite input from different stakeholders, and we try and follow through as best as we can. And accountable means just being upheld to the standards that we're setting for ourselves as well as others. To me, that means having the respect for everybody and not being harsh. That would mean what it means to me.
Gotcha. Well said. So, can you give me a couple of stories, whether you've experienced that yourself or you've led others?
I would say that when we first got started, it was very much we were following the trying to get as much work as possible. We were more focused on the revenue, which is more of a leader bottom line mentality that we had, and we realized that we were just kind of spinning our wheels. And Tom and I just like, hey, this is our mission, this is our vision, these are our values, and we just kind of wrote them up real quick, threw them on the website, and didn't really give them a second thought. And it wasn't, we thought, we're just going to continue going. I think we were about 20 people at the time, and we decided to, that's when we started noticing some things started happening where people started leaving us. We started hiring new people; they would quit, and I felt we were spinning our wheels on how we were growing. And we were working really hard, but we weren't producing the same results as we were before. And I would say that's when we really kind of took a step back and started really focusing on what our culture was. And that's when I was really started learning more about culture and how important it is for an organization. So even to this day, I get asked a lot to come in and give other organizations advice on how to grow and things. And I always say, start with their culture. And make sure that you are living that culture as well. Like whatever values that you are saying that the company has, those are also your values. So,
right.
Don't make up other values that are aligned with yours, because you're going to have an area of incongruence, and that's going to be a problem. Because people are going to be able to see right through that. You're not going to come off as authentic and stuff. And so that's something that we did, and we ended up. I think one reason we've been very successful is that we took all our employees at the time, and we've done this several times throughout the years, but we'll bring our employees together. And have them reevaluate what our values are, what our culture is, and see if we can get more buy-in. And we felt that that's been really successful for us.
Beautiful. Yeah, definitely leaders out there shouldn't just give lip service, right? It's not just like you said, if you throw it on the wall and, come back later every year, maybe every other year, right? And if you don't really believe it, people will see right through it. And that's unfortunate because to your point, like people will come and go if they don't really are in an environment where they truly believe that you guys are trying to make an impact, right?
Right.
What is the vision? What is the mission? And how you treat others makes a big difference. So as you were growing with the organization, and you said you kind of connected with the company every year, maybe twice a year, but how did you see that growth, and how was it challenging keeping that culture going from 20 to 50, 100, 300, Just walk me through that.
It was. I would say that our culture has had a shift, and how we do things has had a shift. One thing that Tom and I really kind of started doing is we started setting goals for the company and for ourselves as well. And we were like, we'd look at our processes as well, and knowing that, if we needed to scale up, if we wanted to prime a contract, where we were currently working, there's some things that we needed to invest in. And, I'd say recruiting was a big one. Looking at how we were currently doing recruiting, which was basically Tom and I going through our Rolodex, finding people, meeting people there on site. And that's unsustainable, right? You can't continue to grow that way. You're going to get to about 20 to 30 people before you start running into problems. So that's when we really kind of started focusing on our infrastructure. And we started focusing on what are those things that we need to invest in order to grow. And we'd actually talked to other companies that were much bigger than us and asked them about, hey, how are you doing your recruiting? How are you doing your HR? Because at the time we were outsourcing our HR to a PEO, a professional employee organization, which were great. It's a great way to grow. If you're getting a company started, I highly recommend using them. But at some point, it becomes a little bit more expensive. And at some point, it really starts to affect your culture as well. And it's something you're not going to realize that until you run into any employee issues or things of that nature. And so that's when you really start focusing on your employee handbook. You start focusing on making sure that your employee handbook aligns with your culture as well and all that.
Right. Gotcha. And so processes, systems as you continue to grow, right? Because you were saying after so much, you can only do so much. So that helped, right? But I guess what I'm trying to get a little bit more is how much did the culture change, or how much did you have to manage that and be more intentional as the growth happened, right?
Yeah, you had to be a lot more intentional as we continue to grow. It was very easy. I used to know everybody. When we were about 50 people or below, we knew everybody by name. And it's something that as we've continued to grow, I no longer became billable. Tom was no longer billable. When we started pulling ourselves out of the process of interviewing everybody, that's when we really started to not know everybody as well as we used to. And that's when we had to become a lot more intentional with our culture and with what we're doing with the employees, to the point to where, now we do monthly working sessions or just like monthly happy hours, or just things to get people out, just to improve the culture, just get to know everybody. And I admit, I've moved so far away, it's hard for me to attend all those as I'd like to. But still try to make it from time to time. And it's definitely important to do. And we hired a full executive team that does a great job. They understand what the culture is. Right. As we continue to grow. They've done a great job of managing that and setting all those events up and making sure that people are coming. And we created a newsletter as well to improve communication, which is something that we felt that was lacking as well. So we did that for our employees. And now we do that to communicate out, can be as clear as possible what's going on. Our president's been doing an amazing job of just keeping abreast of what's happening with our growth. And a lot of the feedback we've been getting has been pretty great, that we communicate better than some of the other companies that people have worked at.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And one last question in this topic, because our audience, I think you're one of the few kind of government contractors guests that I've had. I've had other employees or people in that world, but you as an owner kind of gives us a different perspective from this. So as you were growing, do you feel like training your leaders with not only the culture, the vision, do you think that's important? And how was that implemented within your organization?
It is. And I readily admit we don't do as much training as we probably should, but we do support people to go do the training. We have, our HR is make sure that everybody has the training necessary. When we brought everything in-house, we set up a portal And we make sure all that training stuff is on, all the training documents and everything that people need are on the site. They're easily found. And we have feedback loops where, we have leadership kind of reach out, be as mentors to new employees, making sure that everybody's aligned, everybody's, understanding what needs to get done, on understand our culture and things like that. So we try and get, like that buddy system set up for folks to kind of help each other out.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I just wanted to know because one of the things that we do as an organization, and we're not as big as 300, but we're growing. And I feel as a leader of my organization that training is very important, especially as I'm pushing a lot of these values. To your point, like you can create the vision, the mission, and the core values. But if you're not reminding our folks, we're not kind of showing examples. Here's how you interact with a customer. Here's how you interact with your peers or colleagues or a prime contractor or a subcontractor, right? Like just to give scenarios, it may seem like a big investment at first, but I think it's something that I've seen success and I recommend others, right?
I agree. And I would say that's having that learning mindset, where, you celebrate everybody's wins, you celebrate that publicly, and you learn from people's mistakes as well. And, having that psychological safety is important in any culture where you're not being punished for making those mistakes. You're trying to learn from them and you're trying to instill that into the culture that it's okay to have those mistakes as long as everybody's learning from them. And that's something that is a challenge as you continue to grow. But I do think that having that learning mindset is very important. And it's something I take to heart. I have 3 master's degrees and I still haven't stopped education. I went to MIT a few years ago and continue to learn as much as I can about leadership and growth and all that.
Absolutely. I'm actually taking an MIT class right now called the Tech CEO. And it's interesting enough, the first few sessions was all about leadership. And they even talked about leading with empathy. And I was like, hey, I have a podcast, kind of shameless plug in there. So it was good to kind of understand that. I feel like I was doing something right there. But coming back to what you were saying about the mindset and driving, learning from the mistakes and building, I mean, growing a company is definitely tough. And you have to have the stamina to keep pushing. But now, one thing that I was learning about you is that you are an Ironman, right? Or you've done a lot of Ironman. So talking about stamina is talking about mental, right? More than physical. Like walk me through your preparation and your leadership, because this is a leadership kind of podcast, but we need to lead ourselves to be great. And I'm curious on how you led yourself through that journey.
Yeah, well, I can't say I led myself through that journey. I just like everybody else, we have, even in business, I have mentors in business. Like I used Vistage for a long time and I learned a lot from other CEOs in the DC area, which has been great. And then when I started doing triathlons, I found another mentor, a great coach that I started using, Chuck Kyle, who was, he did a lot of great stuff and helped me kind of tone down my bike and my running and as well as a little bit of the swimming. I'm a bigger guy, so I was always never best at the swimming. And through Chuck, he taught me, basically we built a plan. Having a plan in place is always important, right? You don't just jump into doing anything in business without having some sort of plan. And just like running an Ironman, you have to have a training plan in order to get you up to finishing 140.6 miles. And so I'm a big numbers guy. So it just made sense to me about getting a power meter on my bike and making sure I don't burn myself out.
Right.
Because you're on your bike for hours, 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes. And so you have to learn how to eat on your bike. You have to learn how to maintain your power and all that. And so I would always just watch my numbers, watch the heart rate, watch my power meter. And then given my size, I usually kill the bike, but then everybody would catch me on the run. So it was, but usually by the time I got to the run, I was fine to do a little bit of jogging. And so I like to finish them. And for a while I was doing them. The last one I did was in Austria. So I was trying to use them a little bit of travel as well. And my sister came out and supported me for that. And it was just a great way to kind of see different parts of the world. I mean, it's, my sister was also in the Navy and I did, she asked me to do the Tokyo Marathon with her beforehand, that's an experience in and of itself. So I'm happy when she got stationed in Italy, she came up to Austria to see me participate there. But she was not kind to me. The very next day, she made me get up and go hiking with her.
Oh, man. All right, get up. Let's go. That's awesome. But, I appreciate that's a great accomplishment. So congratulations on that. And I would challenge you that you did, although you had mentors, great mentors and teacher, right? They all can only take you so far. You still got to do it. You still got to take care. You still got to put that one foot forward, or pedal one, at a time, or are you swimming? So to our guests here, it's like, I feel like we have to take care of ourselves, and we need to change that mind to take action, to prepare, to train, and all that stuff.
Having that discipline is important. I mean, because it was, I was waking up at 5 a.m. or beforehand just to get my bike in. It's very humid and very hot sometimes in the DC. And if you have in the DC area, and if you have a 100-mile bike ride to do that day, do you want to do it in the middle of the day when it's, nice and 90 degrees plus with great humidity? Or do you want to do it like at 5 a.m. when it's a little bit cooler? So that's what I used to do. It's just like, having that discipline is very important. And I think that discipline really translated to our business mindset as well. Just like understanding you have that goal in place, you set up a plan, and you start following those metrics, those KPIs essentially. That's kind of what the same thing the same approach I would take in business is what we would take in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just a little bit of being vulnerable here. I didn't do the Ironman, but I did the Olympic triathlons about 15 years ago. And I did 4 of them for 2 years. And I did the nation's triathlon here. Quite the experience for sure. In my last one, I didn't finish. So this is my vulnerability here that I want to share. I did it in Lorette Caverns.
Yep. I've done that one.
You've done that one? Oh my gosh. So you can relate. So I did the lake. I did the swim. I came out, got on the bike. As soon as I got out of the bike, because there were hills, and I didn't prepare. And preparation is important. I prepared flat. I was not expecting these big, huge hills, right? So it killed me. By the time I came back, got off my bike, I could not walk.
Yeah.
I could not. My muscles were just gave out. I was just laying there. And I was like, disappointed. And that's been hunting me ever since. But
have to get on the bike. But yeah, I would recommend talking to Chuck. He did a great job for me, but it's something like, you could download virtual courses. And so you could train for those hills. And that's what he would do for me. It was just like make me learn the course and make sure that the muscles were there. That muscle memory, I ended up getting that. But yeah, I had something like that similar happen to me on my first half Ironman, where my legs just, I wasn't drinking enough. Or I was drinking enough water. I just didn't have, my body like all the electrolytes. So needed some other things in my fuel.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, we move on. I just wanted to share that experience there. But let's move on to, I would love to learn a little bit more about your Navy experience, especially let's talk a little bit from a leadership perspective, because I know the military is, and I'm going to generalize here, but it's very rigid, very hierarchical, right? Mm-hmm. But have you experienced any leadership when it comes to leading with empathy, really caring and any of that?
I would say that I didn't receive a lot of that. It was very rigid in the Navy when I was there. Yeah. It wasn't until when I got out and I was a contractor supporting the Army, and I was doing some ISR work, the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance work with the Army. I was supporting some of the special forces teams where I really saw some great leaders. And that's something that even to this day, I stay in touch with some of those guys. And that's where I would say that I really saw leadership in action, where they would do the hot washes at the end of different missions. Yeah. They would, at end of different projects, they would always go like, all right, what went right? What went wrong? They weren't demonizing anybody. They weren't pulling anybody down. They were trying to help each other. They're trying to learn from each other. And I really appreciate that. That's something that I've always taken from them. And I just saw how tight-knit group of men were involved in those. Right. And it's something that I was very amazed at the leadership there. And I feel very blessed and very fortunate to have supported them in some capacity. So I was very happy to do that. And I used to travel down to Tampa quite a bit and down to North Carolina as well. And it just helped them out on those things. And I was always happy to be a supporting member of those teams.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now as we're seeing a lot of the technologies, right, changes such as AI and generative AI, I'm seeing a lot of posts on your end that can you, what's your vision on a lot of these technologies and how will these technologies impact per se how we lead and how we interact with folks?
Yeah. So, I feel like I'm having this conversation almost every day with AI, and at MIT when I was there, AI was the new topic, and we had some professors come out that were at the forefront of it, and that's when I started really kind of playing with it. And then since then, I've played with a lot of different tools, and you realize that companies are just popping up left and right, trying to perform. They're putting front ends on different AI tools, on different AI large language models and things. And right now I'm getting my doctorate degree, and AI is a big topic of it. It's actually going to be a big part of my dissertation. But I sit as a board member for some boards, and AI is also a topic of conversation where some of the boards I'm on are very forward facing. They're like, yes, we need to use it. Others are no, they're very cautious. And I'm realizing that a lot of that has to do with trust, trust in AI. And so when you peel that onion a little bit, you realize that, what is it people don't trust about it? And it's, either the inputs and the outputs, which is garbage in, garbage out. Do they not trust the model, or do they not trust the leadership? So it's just like trying to understand, and you'd be surprised that people are across the board on those 4 topics as to why they don't trust AI. And I've taken a step further and went and got certified as an AI expert. And I actually did it in Europe because it felt like there were some AI laws there that the US hasn't addressed yet. And the US has looked at it as like, oh, we have other laws in cybersecurity, we have other laws in these areas that they're going to be the guardrails, but that leaves a big gray area for the use of AI in business. And just in running a business, growing it for the last 16, 17 years now, I know how important ethics are. I know how important governance is just from being on a board. These are things that need to be addressed. So if you're looking to integrate AI into your business, companies need to look at it from a governance and ethical perspective. Like, how are they doing it? How are they sharing this information with those, large language models? Because I've been seeing and hearing some horror stories of people using ChatGPT or Claude or one of these large language models are using it. Employees are using it right now without guidance from their leadership. Yeah. They're entering information in there, and then other people are finding this information that was entered in there, and it's creating all kinds of issues. And so on that board that I just mentioned, I've recently helping them write the policy right now. I'm doing an AI audit. Where can AI be used ethically and to the most effect? Because a lot of these people are using it to try and minimize costs. And I tell them, it's like, hey, this is a change management process. If you're using AI to bring down your costs, you might see that come down in the short term, but in the long term, you need to start thinking about it strategically. And I'm seeing pushback from other employees saying this is going to take my job. And I was coming to say, no, AI is not going to take your job. The people that know how to use AI are going to take your jobs. That's going to be that's a differentiator. And so that's where I've been coming in, and I've been asked to train some people, some different organizations, their employee base on how to use the AI. So I've been doing some of that. I've been staying very busy doing those things, and also looking at doing AI audits and trying to help other organizations with the integration.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I appreciate your feedback. And I just recently read an article that from MIT, funny enough, that 95% of people deploying and implementing AI have failed, right? Yes. And a lot of them has to do with not so much technology, it's to do with the enablement, the empowering and providing the right structure for the users to do the right things. They don't know. They're given the keys to a car and they're just driving, right? They're not really doing the right things, or at least corporations are not really investing in the right things. And we're seeing a lot of that stuff, both with our customers in the government as well as our customers in the commercial side.
Understood. And I, it's funny enough you bring that up. I always use the car as my analogy in my talks, where I'm bringing it up and saying, hey, it's like we all know how to drive a vehicle.
Yeah.
And even to the point where one of my professors also used the car as his analogy as well. Where it's like, we know, like if you borrow my car today, Gino, you know what P means, you know what the DR, and you know what all those means. Yep. You also know if there's a big puddle of oil underneath your vehicle, you probably shouldn't drive it. If one of your tires is low, you probably need to change it. You know the basics, right?
Yeah.
And I'm approaching AI in that same aspect. It's like people should know the basics of how to implement it and how it's being used and how it's getting its answers. And you should know enough to double check the answers that it's giving you to make sure that it's correct. You should never just trust the answer that the AI gives you, because that's going to lead down a path of where it's going to give you an incorrect answer at some point, and it's going to be in a very poor way.
Right.
It'll make you look in a very bad light, I should say. And so I'm looking at it from that perspective. And I also read that same article, and I actually have a post coming out on that, I think in another week or so, because I read that this weekend and I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And I do think that a lot of it is failing too. It's I do think an easy win that people should do is identify champions within their organization, understand who's using the AI, who's using it successfully, and again, having that culture of psychological safety where you can actually learn from one another, learn from each other's mistakes. People are using it right now. People are using it in your organizations. Understand it's, cat's out of the bag. Let's figure out, put together, figure out how best to use it, who's using it the best, and have them be the champion. I do think that if leadership is saying, hey, we're going to be using this AI tool and we're going to use it in this way, people are going to be a lot less apt to adopt it. That's where, having that audit come in place and figure out who's using it, in what manner, identifying champions, you're going to have a lot more success rate and doing the integrations that way.
Beautiful, beautiful. No, I appreciate that. And we can talk all day long on AI. I feel like there's so much content, so much opportunities right now that we're seeing. So coming back to leadership though, as we're getting ready here on our descent here, let's talk a little bit about, I like hearing you're a learner, right? You're learning, constantly learning the degree. I believe you might be getting your doctorate as well. Is that right? So what is the legacy you want to leave behind with all this experience that you have, to your kids, to future leaders? This is a deep question, but I thought I ask it.
That is a very deep question. It's a very good question. I've thrown around the idea of and I'm getting this idea as well from a professor at Drexel about maybe turning in some of the work I've been doing into a book, having a legacy that way. One of the mentors I had within Vistage was very, I still quote him. I still think this conversation a lot. It's like you have to have goals in business, in your personal life, your spiritual life, and your community. And I remember when he told me that, I'm like, I was just having my business goals and I had my Ironman goals. I did not have family goals. I did not have, spiritual goals or community goals. And since then, I've tried to become a lot more well-balanced. And I think when you're looking at legacy, that's when you need to start focusing on those community, spiritual, family goals. And I think that's a big piece that me and my wife do. It's I try and be done with work at 5 and just focus. I'm cooking dinner for the kids. We spend a good 3-4 hours with them making, I love reading them stories every night. I love putting them to sleep because I know, when my kids are 17, 20, I'm not going to be doing that. Right. But I want them to at least have those memories. And it's something that I don't want to miss. But usually when they're asleep, that's usually when I get up and answer more emails and do things like that. So to me, like if you're looking at legacy, your goals need to be shifting to the community. Your goals need to be shifting to your family and your spiritual goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so those are the conversations I'm having with my wife right now. It's like, how do we want to do this? Definitely, I'm involved in some charitable organizations right now. So I'm very passionate about what their missions are. And so I think a lot of my legacy is going to be involved with them somehow.
Beautiful.
But also, how can I be more supportive of my community as well? And things like that. Beautiful. So those are things that I'm constantly thinking about as well.
100%. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a deep question there, but real quick, you feel like you're a creative individual? Like the reason I'm asking here's why. I love when my kids were little and I love reading them books and telling them stories. One thing that I did, and they still talk to this day, is I would ask them to give me a place, a person, and a thing, just whatever. Like kids are kids, right? Like sometimes they would say, at that time it was like Mario or Princess Peach or something like that, and like the star and Mario World, right? So that gave me an idea to, and I would just come up with a story for them.
Oh, no.
And I would plug in, once upon a time, there was like two little kids walking around and they stumbled on this lady. Her name was Princess Peach. And they found, so you navigate through that story and it's going to make a huge impact.
I'll do that. I'll tell you one thing that I have been doing. My son recently discovered the Goonies. And so we watched the Goonies on repeat, quite a bit more than I've ever seen it in my life. But I took the opportunity, like we got into geocaching as well, because he's in Scouts. And so I wanted to learn how to use a compass and stuff. And I started creating a treasure map for him.
Oh, wow.
And so we'll go into the woods behind my house and, I'll bury, I hope he doesn't listen to this at some point here soon. But I've been burying treasures for him and creating these little treasure maps. And it's like,
That's amazing.
his first day of school was just 2 days ago. And the thing he wrote on is like, what do you want to be when you're older? He's like, treasure hunter. And I was like, oh, it's like, so it's like, I'm hoping I'm creating some core memories for him, doing stuff like that. But it's, and I'm hoping I'm not getting him ticks. Always checking him. But yeah, we're always running around the woods. Like, he's like putting an X on a random trail and hope nobody else takes the treasure I left for him.
Yeah. That's amazing, Michael. That's the impact and the memories that you're creating that they will remember always. So good job on that, man. But anyway, so moving on, there's a segment called Flip the Mic, where I ask my guests to ask me a question. Any question you may have that might pop up. So
yeah, I mean, I'd like to know about your background. I mean, you're from Peru. What brought you to the States, and how did you get into government contracting?
Oh, great question. So came here in the early 90s from Peru with my dad, my mom, and my sister. I was 10 years old and grew up in this area, Falls Church, Arlington area. And went to school, West Virginia University, got my undergrad and master's, came out and worked for a couple years, 3 years. Then I started Bravo Consulting Group in 2007, actually. So I've been doing this for 17 years. My background, I'm a software engineer by trade and got into government contracting through just being in this area, right? You throw a rock and you're going to hit a government contractor, right? So he was like, hey, to support the government, started supporting the VA, then DOJ, DHS, and got our 8A certification. We were able to maximize, we were able to get some prime contract. And we got into the intel space around 2013 with White House Communication Agency and then DIA. So we had a prime contract there. And then we've been in the intel, growing in the DoD and federal civilian as well. So it's definitely especially this year, has been a challenging times for many of us, right? But I still love the mission and supporting. We do a lot of Microsoft technologies, especially AI, Copilot, Azure OpenAI and all those different things. So leadership is something in culture I've learned in the last 7 years that is very important. People leave companies not because money per se, but they leave people, right? They leave those relationships that if you don't treat them well, you don't treat them right, they're going to go find something else. So,
right. And what made you do the podcast? Like you went from government contracting to a podcast.
Yeah. Hey, this was, talk about spiritual, one of the things that you were mentioning about a year and a half ago, I've been doing this, leading this in core values within the organization, and something inside of me, I don't know what it is, kept coming up. It's like, you got to put this out there. You got to put this out there. I was like, nobody wants to listen to a technical leader about leading with kindness, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But fortunately enough, I was blessed to connect with Aaron, who's our producer, amazing producer. And he said, I will make it very easy for you to just come in and show up and we'll take care of everything. I was like, all right, if you're going to do that. So how can I say no? And, the rest is history. Now we're on episode 67. So having an amazing experience journey. Love having great guests like yourself to share with the world out there, with the audience, how we can lead with kindness and taking care of our people, whether it's you're leading an organization or you're as an entrepreneur or a business owner or just an individual or a contributor. There's a lot of things that you can do, right? Yeah. So thank you for the question. So let me give you 3 quick questions on your end. What's one book every leader should read?
I mean, I've actually been, I read all the time, and I knew you were going to ask that. And it's something that I love to read nonfiction books, but at night I have to read a fiction book. It just kind of quiets the mind, allows me to sleep. And so being an avid reader, it's hard to pick out one book, but one book or a couple books that I have, one on strategy, Elizabeth Johnson, Step Up, Step Back. I'm not sure if you have had any of her classes at MIT, but I had the privilege of meeting her, and she led one of the courses. And it's a book that I've read. I've recommended a lot of my executives team to read it, but it's on strategy on how to implement it and all that. And I've given that book to quite a few people. Also been, I got introduced into Stoicism in the Navy. I read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Oh, yeah. But I didn't touch it for almost 20 years. And then through Ryan Holiday, and got reintroduced to it. So I've been reading a lot of his books as well, Ryan Holiday's books. So I'd recommend those. But fiction wise, at night, one of my favorite books that I read was Lincoln Highway. So I know it's
Nice.
not a business book, but it's something that definitely.
It's a book, right? And so I love that. So thank you for sharing that. What's one favorite quote or mantra?
So just being in Rome, I don't really have one favorite one, but I can tell you I was just in the Colosseum like last week, and it seemed as if every American guy that was there was like quoting the Gladiator movies. So I have all those stuck in my head right now. Like, are you not entertained?
Yeah.
I heard like maybe 10 guys saying that. I just cracked me up.
It's too funny. Beautiful. If you could have coffee with anyone in the past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Another great question. Recently been watching a lot of talks by, Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO. Love to pick his brain on culture change at scale and responsible AI use. I've been reading a lot of what he's just been putting out there. I'd say he'd be at the top of my list there. But also just kind of myself, 2040, how much has changed, because I think about myself, like, growing up in Wyoming, never leaving the state till, well, I guess we'd go to Montana, but we never really leaving that area until I was in my 20s. Like, thinking like how far I've come since then. Where are you going to be 15, 20 years from now? It'd be just kind of interesting to give myself advice on things to avoid.
That's a great perspective yourself. Something I always thought about is like, I would love to interview my future self, right? My higher self. It's like, hey, am I doing the right things? No. But we'll see. But thank you for sharing. All right. So where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's an easy one for us. Axiologicsolutions.com. That's our company website. And those are the easy ones for us to find me at. But mostly, my LinkedIn profile I keep that up to date, and they can reach out to me there.
Yeah, you're putting some great content out there, so highly recommend people to follow you. So what's one final thought you want to leave our audience with here?
I would say that culture is very important. And if you're trying to scale a company, focus on your culture. I think that's one main area to kind of help you stand out from the competition.
Beautiful. Well, Michael, thank you very much for sharing your journey, your wisdom, and congratulations on all your success and the legacy you're going to continue to leave behind with everything you do. And so I appreciate all the feedback. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Gino.
Absolutely. And to our audience, thank you for listening to the Kind Leader Podcast. And remember, be kind, bring value, and rise together. Have an amazing day.